I second the amendment by my colleague, excuse me, the member for Melbourne, and commend the member for Melbourne for his unflinching commitment to keep the pressure up in this place to do something about climate change. Deputy Speaker, I urge the members of this House to embrace the amendment, because to do otherwise would be madness. Frankly, Deputy Speaker, it is madness to be wanting to wind back strong action on climate change. It is madness to be wanting to take the price off carbon. I just don't get it. I don't see why the government is wanting to act in this way for any reason other than their political self-interest and trying to score political points about an important area of public policy. That can be the only explanation for the behaviour of this government, because every other way that you might approach this challenge and this area of public policy, you reach the same conclusion. When you approach it from any other direction, you reach the conclusion that we must act on climate change, and that includes, first and foremost, putting a price on carbon and keeping a price on carbon. And ensuring the price on carbon sends a very strong signal to the markets that companies that pollute must clean up their act, and a strong signal to consumers to stay away from products that are more sensible because they're based on polluting the climate, and instead to go towards products and services that are cheaper because they're based on production techniques and ways of doing things that are better for the environment. I think one of the problems, Deputy Speaker, is that too many members on that side of the chamber, too many members of the government, some will admit it and others won't, although I suspect many of them admit it in their private conversations with their constituents, they need to admit they don't believe in climate change. They're deniers. They don't believe that mankind is making the environment more dirty and that because of that we are helping to change the climate. Yes, climates change over millennia for all sorts of reasons, but surely there can be no doubt in 2014 that it's the behaviour of humankind that is accelerating the change of the climate in bad and dangerous ways. The member for Melbourne has eloquently talked about extreme weather events and the fact that it's only a matter of time that catastrophic bushfires will be regular events, perhaps every couple of years. And yes, some of the effects of climate change a rich and lucky and a fortunate country like Australia will be able to adapt to. But what about less developed countries, less rich countries, countries in our region? They don't have the riches and know-how that we've got. You know, we can move entire cities if we have to, but they can't. They will die, and they will die in droves from the effects of climate change. So, on one hand, because of the effects and the costs to us in Australia, we've got to do something about it. But for perhaps a greater moral imperative is to do something about it to help those less fortunate people than ourselves that are less well equipped to do something about climate change. I don't get it why so many members of the government just don't believe in climate change. I mean, there is an overwhelming consensus amongst the very best minds in the world that the climate is changing on account of humankind and we must change the way we do business. Members of the government don't seem to understand that this isn't just a problem now. In some ways, the bigger problem is the future and the world we will leave for our children and their children and their children. In fact, climate change is one of the most dramatic examples of intergenerational social injustice that you could possibly comprehend. What right do we have? Deputy Speaker, what right do we have? Well, it's no right to leave the world knowingly in a worse state than what we found it. And as the father of a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, I want to be able to look them in the eyes, and I can't fathom why members of the government aren't wanting to look their children in the eyes and their grandchildren. Surely they want to look them in the eyes and say that when push came to shove and we had the opportunity in this place to do something about climate change, then we did something. We acted. Well, how are the members of the government going to look their kids and their grandkids in the eyes and say, well, They were the government that took the price off carbon, that left it to future generations to deal with the problems of climate change and a greater problem it will be. Deputy Speaker, we must take a leadership position. We must take a leadership position in this place and make the tough decisions, and we as a nation must take a leadership position on the global stage. And yes, while the percentage of global pollution that comes from Australia is but a proportion of global pollution, it wouldn't even matter if it was zero pollution. There would still be the moral imperative for us to take a leadership role on the global stage. I don't know what Rob Menzies would think about what's happened to the Liberal Party, and I'll associate the Country Party and now the Nationals with that comment. You know, even if you didn't agree with the Liberal Party of the Menzies era, it was still a great party. There might have been policies people disagreed with, but it was still a great party. But what has the Liberal Party now become? The country of invading Iraq, of sending asylum seekers back to the authorities from which they claim to be fleeing from, and now the party that would dismantle the monumental reform of the 43rd Parliament to put a price on carbon. And a monumental and difficult reform it was. And history will show that the 43rd Parliament and the decision to put a price on carbon was one of the greatest political achievements of any government, of any parliament since Federation. And so too, Deputy Speaker, history will record that the government in the 44th Parliament made one of the greatest blunders of any government by removing that price on carbon. You know, there's all this talk in here about the economy. Well, how about we start talking about the environment? How about we start talking about society? How about we start talking about the public interest and the interests of our kids and their kids and those that will follow them? If we started talking about the environment and about community and about the future and the future for our kids, maybe people in this place would have a different response instead of just talking about the economy. Well, yes, it does cost to make the world a better place, and they're costs that we should be prepared to pay. Because what right, Deputy Speaker, do we have to say the price is too much now, but it won't be too much for our kids in the future? We don't have that right, particularly when the cost we're leaving our kids will be so much greater at a time of unknown financial circumstances or economic circumstances. We don't even know what capacity they will have to pay the bill that we're going to leave them. They may even have much reduced capacity to pay the bills that we're leaving them. Well, we have no right to leave them that bill because we ran up this tab. We and the people who came before us. We have a moral obligation to pay the bill now and to pay it while it's affordable. And it is affordable. And yes, we are looking at a system which sends price signals, and it does make some things more expensive. Well, I'm not going to shy away from that. I'm not going to dodge that, because that's the whole point of putting a price on carbon. Making dirty things dearer, making clean things cheaper, steering businesses towards doing things cleaner, steering consumers towards buying things that are produced more cleanly. That's the whole point about a price on carbon. And I'm not going to shy away from that, Minister. That's the whole point. And yes, electricity and gas does become a little bit dearer. Well, then no wonder that we're seeing so much movement towards renewables, technologies that are becoming cheaper. That's the whole point. We should be celebrating, not demonising, the achievements of the 43rd Parliament. We really should be, Deputy Speaker. And where does this leave our Senate? Where does this leave our senators? You know, I've got nothing personal against the Liberal or Palmer United Palmer senators for Tasmania. They're all good people in their own way. But I tell you what, I disagree with them on this. I disagree with them very, very strongly, because the Tasmanian senators, in doing away with the price on carbon, are not acting in my state's best interest. It's well remarked upon by now, Deputy Speaker, that doing away with the price on carbon will cost hydro in my state $70 million a year and hundreds of jobs. And that's a fact. Don't look at me with a funny, quizzical look on your face. That's a fact. Getting rid of the carbon price will cost my state dearly. And this is another good example of where senators need to stand up for their state and not let their chain be yanked by their political parties. Because if the senators, if the Liberal and Palmer United Party senators stood up for Tasmania, the whole 12 of them, Liberal, Palmer, Labor and the Greens, all 12 of them would vote against the repeal of a price on carbon. But they won't. They will allow their chains to be yanked by their party masters. And that's a failure of the Senate, a serious failure of the Senate. In closing, Deputy Speaker, can I make one point? I've been very, very alarmed in recent days to be hearing and seeing the comments from some corporations in this country that they will not be passing on any savings or any reduction in price from the abolition of a price on carbon. I read just yesterday that Qantas and Jetstar are saying there'll be no price reduction. Heavens! Some of the first companies to say the price will go through the roof. Well, they better pass on any savings that come from a reduction or from an abolition of a price on carbon. Like the comment today in Question Time, I think it was Woolworths was referred to, them saying that, well, there was no real extra cost, so there won't be any reductions in prices now. That better not be the case, because I tell you what, I'll be out the front of the barricade steering consumers towards those companies that act honestly, act ethically, and do genuinely pass on any reductions in price on account of the abolition of a price on carbon. Let the market judge those companies that don't pass on any reductions in prices on account of these developments. To that end, I think the Palmer United Party attempt to at least hold some companies to account, in principle, is a good idea. But I would hope, Minister, I would hope that the government will keep a close eye on all people in the market, all operators in the market, to ensure that they all genuinely pass on to the consumer any reduction in their cost of production. Deputy Speaker, can I just close by saying this is a very, very sad day in this place, a repeat of the very sad day we had recently when this legislation went through here before this. And you know what? I think it all comes down to crass politics, because there are enough good men and women in the government, people of sharp minds, of good heart, to understand the importance of putting a price on carbon, understand the importance not just for the environment but for the community, for our kids, for the economy, because it will help prepare us for the future global economy as all of our trading partners are moving or have moved to put a price on carbon. It disappoints me greatly that they're prepared to put the delivery of a three-word slogan during an election campaign and what was ultimately just a strategy to distract the previous government. They're putting the delivery of that political strategy ahead of the public interest, ahead of the economy, certainly ahead of the environment. And that's a terrible failure of governance in this country, that any party would be prepared to do that. Again, I make the point, Deputy Speaker, I just don't get it. I just don't know why people would do that. I don't know why people wouldn't understand the science. But what about those who do understand the science? And as the Speaker made the point earlier, even if they don't believe the science about climate change, surely they understand it's a good idea to help clean up the environment. As I think it was the member for Sydney said, we don't let people put sludge in the river or drop litter by the roadside. So why is it okay to pump pollution into the atmosphere? Why can't we put politics aside for a moment? I don't get it, Deputy Speaker, other than to understand that in this area of public policy, this government is failing us terribly. And let the record show that. Let the record show, for a long time to come, which members voted to put a price on carbon. And let the record show which members are now working to overturn it. And at least I'll be able to, and I know the member for Melbourne, will be able to look the next generation in the eye, and the members of the Labor Party, and good on you, because the Labor Party's been good on this, and I applaud them. Don't applaud them for everything, but I'll certainly applaud you for this. At least we can look our kids and other kids in the eye, and their kids, and we can say that when the pressure was on, we did the right thing. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the honourable member for Denison.